This episode of Survey Program Podcast contains spoilers for the Chapter 5 Weird Root, and as many personal and character-focused discussions of the Weird Root tend to, it covers some very, very serious topics. So prepare for emotionally intense and potentially triggering discussions in this episode, and for a second straight episode, I ask, please take this episode in the good faith it was recorded with. Music is by Highwell with the new Lost Girl remix available at the link in the description. Good survey program. All right. And so first off, welcome back, Jackie, to this is your fourth episode, I think, something like that.
I think fourth or fifth. I think fourth.
I actually keep challenge coin standings somewhere. So
I think fourth, and we've got the fifth in the pipe.
This is your fourth, I think. Yeah, this is your fourth.
Yeah.
All right. So you're almost to that 5-episode challenge coin, which is not actually a real object because challenge coins are so expensive, dude. Maybe one day. But anyway,
Yeah.
the listeners know you. But since it's your first time back since Chapter 5 came up, before we even dive in to the thing we're here to talk about today, what I really want to talk about is how'd you find Chapter 5? What's your review?
If Chapter 4 wasn't such an incredibly personal thing for me, Chapter 5 would definitely be my favorite. It's so good. It's so delicious. It touches on so many wretched little things that that I love. It's so emotionally charged. I love how miserable Chris is.
Yeah.
It's really funny to me that this was pitched to us and people talk about it like it's the last fun time, the last big frivolous adventure, because it's kind of that, but it's probably the most emotionally painful chapter, like, up to this point, right? This one was a tough one.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like one last fun adventure for Susie. And
yeah,
really,
yeah.
and it's like, because Chris is not actually having that much fun, and Ralsei certainly isn't having that much fun.
Yeah.
And it's, it just sort of, it's a reminder that Susie is sort of in the traditional protagonist role on this bad boy, in a lot of ways, and Chris is a sort of subversion. But like we talked about last week, like, real Chris fans love when Chris is miserable, so that's why I like Chapter 5.
Yeah, I like when they're like tied into a knot and it's being pulled really tight.
Yeah, it's you really feel like those plates just can't keep spinning for much longer.
Yeah.
And of course,
yeah, the end of Chapter 5 especially is just like, oh, all of this is like, it's really hard to imagine the start of next chapter being anything but the fantasy crashing down around Chris and around Susie, just like total disaster.
Yeah. And that's just side A. That's just the regular route,
Yeah.
right? And obviously the plates, I think, all stopped spinning much sooner than any of us may have expected in side B. So that's what we are here to talk about this episode. And so this is a sequel to episode 11, which was our Weird Root episode. Obviously, we've talked about the Weird Root in a lot of other episodes. You can find that in the tags if you're on the website groupstrike.net in the description. So, but I think the main thing we're going to talk about is, we did a post chapter 3 and 4 Weird Root catch up, and now we're sort of, I would say things have progressed both in a way that we could have expected, but also in a way that I was really surprised, and I almost don't want to say delighted, because I know it's bad, but like, I am a little bit delighted because it was better than I even would have expected from the next.
I'll say delighted.
Yeah, sure.
I had a great time.
Yeah, we're both delighted here. I played it. I managed to successfully avoid knowing anything about it. I played through the regular route first, and then I played that evening, the evening of release, I played through the weird route, and just got blown away by it. I remember I didn't mash fast enough first, so I actually aborted first, and started through a regular playthrough, before, and then went to go look up stuff about it. Like, I was basically like stun locked, right? Like, I was too physically uncomfortable to proceed fast enough, and so I didn't know that you could actually get a different ending, right? I thought it was just gonna sort of skip. I thought that was the ending. I thought the aborted route was the ending, and then I went and looked it up, found out there was something else I could do, and I was like, fuck, I gotta sit down and do it again.
Yeah.
And it was extremely intense, and it really took my breath away, and it left me feeling weird for the rest of the day. Did you play it day one?
So day one, marathoned that shit with my girlfriend, which is not normally how I would play these. I took my time with chapter 3 and 4, but I was very excited to discuss it. So, we marathoned side A in, one day, at the end of which I felt basically dead.
Yeah.
We had some shit going on the next day, and then after that, first thing in the morning, started our day sitting next to each other on the couch, and I was not on the controls for it. But Amy played the chapter 5 weird route, and let me tell you, that one is not less weird to be sitting next to someone else doing it.
Interesting. Tell me more, because I haven't had that experience, and so tell me a little more about that.
It's because sitting next to someone doing it it's almost like confusing. Of like, you're just like going for it. You're like really doing this. Oh, we're really doing this. We're really in this right now together. Oh, feels weird. Feels very weird.
And I went and rewatched the scene this morning before, and I still felt it. I mean, this is the thing. This is 2 straight chapters now with a scene that like is tough to watch. Even
it's not. Here's the very, maybe revealing something about myself with this. It's a very tough one to watch, very uncomfortable, kind of nauseous during it. The rest of the day afterwards, I was serene. I felt refreshed. My skin was moisturized. I slept the best I'd slept in weeks afterwards. And I came back to watch it today, and I'm like, still bad to sit through it.
Yeah.
But I get a sense of rightness from it as well that is very strange.
I think the main thing, and I know I'm kind of just like blowing up your whole outline here by just talking about what comes to mind. But
blow up the outline. The outline's bad.
All right. Well, the outline's a great. It was a lot of great stuff to think about before recording this. But I mean, I think the main thing that really struck me, I think the main thing that really blew me away about this was, and one of the reasons why it is exciting to think about, is that it restored, after chapter 4, I think too many people overcorrected into thinking of Noelle as a pure victim, right?
Yes.
And I really, really appreciated the restoration of, and the demonstration of Noelle's agency that chapter 5 gave you. This wasn't just a tired narrative of victimization, right? This isn't just pure sadism. That there's actually like really something in this for Noelle. That there is, the line when you first confront her at the lake is, what terrified me the most about that. I think I want that.
In fact, the first thing that you see on starting up your file is "thank you."
Yeah. And, you can do that. You could have gotten that in chapter 4 as well if you thought about Noelle during a critical scene while on the weird route. And I think a lot of people reacted to that chapter 4 scene by thinking, oh, she's been hypnotized, right? She's in a trance. And it's like, that's not, she's in the, like, whatever magic may exist in the dark world, like in the light world, she's just got a thorn stuck in her finger. Like she's not under the thrall of a magic artifact, right?
She felt something real.
Yeah.
For once, that's really it.
Absolutely. Like, and that is the main thing too. Is especially having seen the abort dialogue first, is that it feels in conversation.
She's aching for something to change.
Yes, exactly.
She wants something real.
And it feels so in conversation with what's happening on the other side, with what's happening in the regular route too, because hometown is this very static place. It's this very, it's this place where it feels like nobody really talks about what's wrong. Nobody acknowledges the darkness that's hiding, both, metaphorically and like literally in the setting beneath the town, right? Everybody is stagnating in this unhappiness, and they're sort of play acting their life. And it's like, I always go back to the more farcical, silly characters being a mirror to what's really important. Like this game uses farce to like signpost what it's talking about, right? And so I keep thinking about like Pizza Pants. I hope everybody's so excited to hear about Pizza Pants in this Weird Root episode. But I kept thinking about Pizza Pants and how, what the real good ending probably requires not just stringing him along with either Caddy or Bratty lying to him, but breaking his heart by having, Blue Ears say, we've been lying, we've been playing with your emotions, and you need to have a big old crash out about this before any healing can happen, right? And that only happening at Chris's prompting of them, right? That Chris has become this force that is actually changing hometown, right? That is actually like unclogging the interpersonal stagnation that's happening. Everything that Chris is doing is like finally changing things.
Yeah. Which I don't know. It also reflects their role in the dark world, and even just in the combat mechanics of the game. Chris is the facilitator.
Yeah.
Chris has for a story that is, I would say, principally concerned with the complications of agency as one of like its primary focuses. Chris has a sort of startling level of agency in hometown, in a scenario in which most other people are just sort of stuck.
Yeah. And one for which escape feels impossible, right? Like Des, I mean, one of the interesting things about the dialogue in both routes of Noelle at the lake is that she still thinks of it, and I know it's still unclear what happened to Des, but she still thinks of it as Des leaving. And I know that's, most of us believe that Des is some other thing, right? Des didn't quite leave hometown of her own volition and go run away in the traditional sense, but rather something has happened to her, or she has made something happen, right? But they feel trapped in this town, and Des and Azra are the only characters that we know who have ever gotten out via different means, right? And Noelle calls it watching her life through glass, and just filling out that, just performing that role of Noelle day by day. And honestly, one of the things that made me think of was like, one thing I really love about this game is that you can come at it from two different directions, right? There's two different ways to approach a complex work of meta-narrative fiction. There's the kind of lore-brained game theory, I want to figure out how all the clockwork parts work approach, and then the character narrative-focused work, approach, where you want to think about how all the character dynamics work and how the relationships work, right? And these are two, I would say, very valid approaches to reading stuff.
I'd say they're both necessary.
Yes, and exactly. But that's the thing, is that these are often framed as in conflict, with practitioners of each approach thinking that the other, right, that the practitioners of the lore approach think that people with the character approach are being fanficky or sugary, right? And people from the character approach thinking that people with lore brain are too mechanical about it, right? But what's interesting is that Deltarune has such great ludonarrative assonance, and it's all of its factors work together to the point where the mechanics and the character are saying the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And so Noelle's vision of seeing her life through glass and playing out her role works both from that heavy lore perspective of, she's a character with a role in a video game, and from the character perspective of, she's a teenage girl experiencing derealization, right? These play hand in hand, and it's a great parallel as well to Ralsei feeling imprisoned by the prophecy and having to play out a certain role. The first, but certainly not the last of the coinciding features between Noelle and Ralsei that we're going to see throughout this game.
Yeah. It's I know that I have a tendency to dig my heels in and insist people turn their head and look at the character driven reading of this work, mainly because it's not that I think that the a meticulous lore focused approach isn't useful. It's just it's like a tidal wave of it, and I'm like, what if we just what if we stop and think about this a little more as it's just presented, right?
Yeah.
But a synthesis is required. I think that Noelle example is a really great one. In a similar, it's similar to things like the implication that nothing exists outside of hometown. You don't need a ton of evidence to just say that's true, because that's how a video game works. There's nothing outside of hometown. Just on its face, it's literally true. But it's very clearly also this is about what it feels like to live in a place where the edge of your world is walking distance from your home.
Yeah.
The entirety of Chris's world is around the size of the distance it would take me to walk from my home in my hometown to the edge of town. And my hometown was not that small.
Yeah.
It was pretty small, but it's not hometown small. And it's you got to at least think about the human experience that the lore aspect here is representing, which I think is very much applies to the weird route and the nature of the choices being made that happen in it, and the relation between Chris's body and their soul. I don't know.
Absolutely. And you and I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about in the week leading up to recording this was thinking about, what am I going to say about how this resonates with me particularly? And, because I want to, there's also that balance in my head of wanting to wear my, this is my media, my detached media critic voice, right? This is my role on this show. And then there's also, I mean, I think part of what makes the Weird Root so effective is it's so cutting that it's hard not to speak about it in really intensely personal terms.
Yes.
And, as somebody, let's just putting all my cards on the table here and just as somebody who's from a small town who, had these emotionally intense relationships growing up, right? These, this super intense sort of mutually self-destructive relationships in high school. And, felt like there was nowhere in the world outside of the town I lived in, because it just seemed inconceivable that I could ever escape that sort of oppressing, small town Americanness of it all. Obviously, this is super impactful to me. And that's just on that top level reading. And then, you get down to the fact that, the kind of emotionally intense relationships you have when you're growing up, you often have situations where you hurt one another. And, people will, push each other too far. Kids will push each other too far sometimes. And, you're feeling these big, intense feelings for the first time in your life. And, I think what's really interesting about the weird root is that I think sometimes people who, I don't know, maybe either haven't been in those situations or are trying to distance themselves from having been in those situations, are often sort of just pinballing from one scapegoat to another, right? And so when they're reading the root, they're saying, oh, capital T, capital P, the player is evil, or oh, Chris is evil, and especially like in the Rise after chapter 5, people have ping-ponged around to being like, oh, Noelle is evil, right? And it's like, this all has to be somebody's fault. And I think it's all much messier and more fascinatingly complicated than all of that. And I mean, really, there's a ton of messiness about like who's in charge here, right? And so I did want to get that, sort of into our discussion about, because I know that there's some stuff mechanically that you and I might have a slightly different perspective on. And so I want to back up and start with the very basic question of, the most important Deltarune question you could ask. What's the nature of the soul?
I might suggest that it's an important question beyond Deltarune, but this is a podcast about Deltarune, so it's good to focus on the game.
Yes, I was. Yeah, this is a little personal joke of me. The Deltarune is, that's the Deltarune makes you ask, what's the nature of the soul?
Yeah, which I mean, the game gives you one answer to that in the very first chapter of the game. It says that red heart is Chris's soul, the culmination of their being, within which is their will, their compassion, and the fate of the world.
Yeah.
That's an answer that the game gives you. That's 4 lines of dialogue. It obviously does not capture the breadth of it, but I do think it is important to highlight that if you're looking for an answer to the question, the game is providing at least this one.
Yeah, or yes, like, Ralse is helpfully explaining it for you.
Yeah.
And so my question then, really what I want to ask you about this then is, the first thing that happens in this game is you connect, right? You connect to this game. You create a vessel. You're asked to choose things about it, and then that vessel is discarded, and instead of connecting to your vessel or whatever original plan the game has, you are connected to Chris, because no one can choose who they are in this world. And I think, the nature of that connection and the way that we are connecting and our understanding of this world seems to me that it must be important, because it's the first thing that you see. And the game was originally released under the title Survey Program, because that was the software device that you're using to connect to this. And so I think the weird root interrogates and makes us ask some questions about what is the nature of that connection. And, where do the choices that we have come from when we're talking, when Chris is moving about the world, with the soul in. And so I'm interested in your perspective on that.
I think that I don't have, I guess the way that I would put it is that I don't have or necessarily feel like I need a concrete answer on the specific nature in Deltarune of what the relationship between Chris and the soul is, so long as from the story that comes out of that connection, I can observe things about it that feel true, I guess. Yeah. For example, like a big one at a basic level to me is just, I think that the decisions that you are presented with when you make choices with the soul are meant to represent things that are decisions Chris would make, like thoughts they're having.
I agree with you on this.
Yes, including everything that goes into the weird route. Um, I like. I think that if you can't accept the idea that the weird route is reflecting Chris's desires and agency in some way, you are kind of rejecting almost everything about Chris,
Yes.
because the mechanics through which you go down that path are not different from the mechanics through which you make choices to do things that Chris clearly wants and that make them happy, like going to the diner with Susie. Like the it's the same part of Chris that facilitates both of those decisions, which is, I think, a big part of what this game is like about, like the point that it's making. Um,
Yes, Chris is a character. Chris is not our vessel. Chris is willful and do their own things. They interpret the choices that we make in their own ways. They sometimes outright, refuse or sabotage our own, our choices in various ways.
yeah,
They're working at cross purposes to us sometimes, and sometimes as collaborators. It's like some kind of triple truces. And I agree with you really fundamentally that, like, if you reject that there's something coming from Chris, and I know we talked about this last time, if you reject that, what we're seeing are our choices that come to Chris, that could be things that Chris could do, then we're throwing out most of our information on the protagonist of this game, which I simply don't accept. I don't think that's a useful way to process the game.
it's probably the most fruitless way that you can read Deltarune.
Yes.
There's just no foundation to the text to build anything else on.
Yes. In the end, like, Deltarune is a game about characters. It's not a game about playing games. It's partially about playing games because it's postmodernist, right? It's aware of its own
Yeah.
medium. But it's, in the end, the fact that Chris is a character is so important, it is one of the very first things that you see. And so, I do try to remember that. And especially since every chapter ends with Chris doing their own thing and expressing themselves as a character in some way.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that definitely gets me most fired up. And we did talk about this last week as well, right? When we talked about Pink and we talked about, the reconciliation between soul and body and the knowledge that, these things need to work in tandem for a person to be whole, right? And, we see Chris as someone who's clearly struggling, who clearly is of two minds about many things, right? Who has, loyalty in various different ways, who's split and conflicted. And, the choices that we make and the determination that the soul gives them, and I didn't mean to use the word determination in like the charged specific lore sense, but like, in the actual,
Yeah.
the
will.
The will, yeah, that the soul gives them is letting them cut through these conflicts and find some sort of definitive resolution for good or bad. And I think, as well, it's really interesting that we, just to circle back to what we were saying earlier, like the story of, this is not a story of like hopeless victimhood, right? I mean, this is that Noelle is also given short shrift by those narratives of saying that this is an entirely alien imposition. And so I want to talk about Noelle for a bit.
Yeah, that there's nothing I love more.
Yeah, and so I want to talk about Noelle because I think she was the most misread in all of this, right? And a lot of people thought that Noelle was purely a victim in this, that she was in some sort of hypnotic trance, and especially that, like, the dialogue, in chapter 4, Normal Route, when she's talking to Susie and she says the things in in her childhood between her and Chris felt forced. A lot of people assumed that meant that she felt that it was either Chris or their parents that was forcing it, right? And we've seen quite a bit. We've seen a bit of recontextualization of all of that, right? Where there's a few things where you can ride the Ferris wheel with Noelle if you vote for the two of them first, and she reminisces about when they were children, extremely fondly, still thinking about how those two kids that voted for each other without even being able to spell each other's names she still wants them to win, right? She still wanted them to be festival king and queen. And after you do that, she will ride the Ferris wheel with you. And she reaches in a normal route, she reaches a moment where, she's reminiscing about how Chris used to shake the Ferris wheel when they were on it, to cheer her up. And then if you do shake it, she's pleased. She laughs. It brings her back. If you sit silently and don't shake it, she says, "No, I'm probably being silly. You never really wanted to win in the first place, did you? Everything back then was just my imagination. You were just doing what I made you, parentheses, just like," and then she trails off. And this line, I think, is extremely important, with the context of the Chapter 5, the Chapter 5 Weird Root scene, where even if you say stop, you can't stop. Even if you say stop, and I just going back, you can say stop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and Noelle will not stop. She will continue to lead you into the lake. She'll override.
And she'll say, "You can't even say stop like you used to," which is crazy.
Yes.
She's so awesome.
Yeah. That's one way to put it. And so this is, I think, probably the most you can't even say stop like you used to is probably the most chilling line in the game, and it does significantly recontextualize what things were like between Noelle and Chris as children. And rather than, I would say, the popular understanding that Chris was the one that was always pushing too far, that this really was, there was discomfort from Chris's side, right? That, there was something going on there. And another point, before I hand it back to you to talk about this, if you aborted the Weird Root in Chapter 4, so this is after, Noelle, after you've frozen Birdley, but before putting the thorn ring back on her in Chapter 4, if you aborted then and then ride the Ferris wheel with her, she wants it back. She wants it back. She wants that power again. She says, "Chris, a couple nights ago, you came and reassured me. You told me everything was a dream. Hearing your voice then, it made me so happy. Everything is back to normal. But are you sure it was all a dream? I'm not saying I want to believe it. That would be terrible. But if there was some piece, just some little piece, if some piece of that power we had was real, wouldn't it be amazing? Chris, don't turn away. Come closer. Explain how you knew what my dream was, Chris." And then the Ferris wheel is hit with a clod of dirt that Susie throws at it.
Which is echoing a different scene as well, of Chris closing their eyes and remembering throwing a clod of dirt at Des riding the Ferris wheel with Azrael.
Yeah. And isn't that interesting too, where, Susie, who is very perceptive and understands that something's going on between Chris and Noelle and the Weird Root and is jealous of it, disrupts Chris and Noelle in the same way that Chris used to disrupt Des and Azrael. That's a very intriguing parallel for everything that's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of many things about the Chapter 5 Weird Rat stuff that is so vindicating to me, of just like, yeah, man, it's about Des. Like, it's about a lot of things. It's about the way that they feel trapped in this town. It's about the weirdness of their relationship and the parts of their history that we don't know, but we can see the echoes of in the present. But fundamentally, the break in the foundation at the beginning of this that can drive these two into like a shared self-destruction is the nature of both of their feelings about Des.
Yeah.
And
the impact that Des going missing, like the hole that it's left in their lives, right? And that they've been trying to paper over ever since.
kind of trying to paper over with Susie in the
Yes.
last few days, it seems like.
Yes.
I mean, it sure makes the shit that Chris is going through in the normal route even more rotten with that context of feeling like Susie's being taken away from them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And now that we've brought up Susie, tell me a little bit more about Susie's role in the Weird Route now.
It's I think that it is fair to say that in the side A, the normal route version of Chapter 5, Susie is pretty consistently inconsiderate towards Chris for almost all of it. Even when she's like trying to be a good friend, um, she's I don't know, she's caught up in like this um, unreal fantasy she's living out that she never thought that a person like her would get to have. Um, and in like a there's so much going on in the Weird Route that is like so important. Another of these like most important things I think is the lead up to the big scene with Noelle is walking around the aftermath of the festival with Susie, where she's really clearly showing like a lot of concern and like warmth for Chris, and like you get, I don't know, you get some of that version of Susie that made Chris feel like everything could be okay back in chapter 4, and it just is so brutal that it takes things being this obviously bad to get that out of her in this chapter.
Yeah.
Like it's so, and she's obviously also kind of just miserable. Like it's got to be so painful for her to see these two people that she cares so much about like imploding in a way that she can't see directly, but you can feel just by being around them like something's clearly wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's also so interesting that it's like in like a really sort of twisted way, it's like, oh, Chris gets what they wanted, right? Like the festival day with Susie, you know, her paying attention to them, all just bad. Bad and sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean,
and it's the thing that snaps them out of like the pure dissociation they start the chapter in, where you can't even get description text for anything.
Yep.
You can't even eat the fucking toast in your house.
Yep. Oh God, it's heartbreaking.
Which again, it'll be obnoxious if I go off about every single thing that I said on the show or in your DMs that was like 100% validated when this scene hit, but I feel like a bit of a true knower after all this.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's also interesting. I mean, there's so much reflection between Chris and Susie that you can only see in this route because she's much more reflective in this. And I mean, tell me a little bit about just like the things that happen when you're walking around with Susie, because I know you've noted some of these down here.
Yeah, I've noted some of them down. It like the Ferris wheel scene where Susie is like mirroring what Chris had done with Noelle in the past, of like shaking the Ferris wheel card. Like I'd summarize all of it as just being like, it's like this is the part that almost feels like the one last fun thing before the sunset, right? Of like Chris does have some fun with her at the festival. She even though, you know, everything is, you know, empty, people are off doing other things, she, you know, if you try to go over to where they're crowning the festival king and queen, she has a thing about how she's like, why is it gotta be a king and queen? Like, whatever we are, it's cooler, right? And it's like, again, you know, that's the thing that Chris wanted to hear in the fucking normal route, instead of the absolutely heartbreaking like speech that they get from her in the ending on like the walk home. Yeah. It's also a thing where a sort of something that's like an undercurrent in the normal route is brought very forward of like the class difference between Noelle versus like Susie and Chris, where Susie is like constantly marveling at the free food, and there is that really, honestly, one of the worst feeling things in this chapter,
Yeah.
is the fucking part where she's like, she's ecstatic over finding a dollar coin on the ground, and then has to talk about how uncomfortable it made her, when Noelle just like whipped out like a stack of like hundreds of dollars to like pay for food or whatever, and Susie
Yeah.
didn't feel like she could even take it.
Yeah.
Um,
And I know people
it
compare that to like often people who are intending to I'll just put a content warning at the top here. Often people who are intending to kill themselves give away their possessions in that way, right? And you
Yeah,
know, I actually thinking about that, like it's really interesting that they it's so interesting to me that Noelle still goes on the date with Susie, even with her plan to do all of this at the end of the day. And I mean, I guess Chris does too, although Chris is no longer in control of the situation, right? Like, this is out of Chris's hands, but it's so interesting to me that Noelle still does that, like still takes that day with Susie before going out and, and going into the lake with Chris, and that also that it doesn't dissuade her, right? That it doesn't change her mind. And so I know some people see, Noelle's side A expression that, I wanted to go away, but I don't anymore now that I have you, as like a contrast that, that she's truly happy on site, in the normal route. And I'm not so sure, because she still gets her day. I mean, is it just that Chris isn't there too? And, I don't know. I mean, it's one of the most fascinating bits of Noelle characterization to me that she still goes on that date with Susie.
yeah. It's, I mean, and I guess getting a little bit away from the scene with Susie prior to the big scene with Noelle, but like onto the aborted route, like the scene that you get there. It's a very strange one in this chapter that sort of implies that everything that you saw was like a shared fantasy that Chris and Noelle were like collectively ideating somehow, that falls away when they fail to uh, follow through, I guess,
Yeah.
is how I would put that. Really difficult to figure out how you're supposed to talk about this one for radio.
Yeah.
Um, because the implications of the scene are so charged.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that makes me think, do you think even on a normal route, Noelle is thinking about that on that date? Like, that something, like, even as she says those things, something is clearly more wrong than she's letting Susie see.
Yeah.
It is so much.
I mean, I think so, and especially since it seems to me that we're going to see Noelle pushed to a lower point than we've seen before with what's happened with her father, you know, in chapter 6. And I mean, especially, I don't know how you're going to square this circle with the aborted route that she seems to be aware of and remember, with things getting worse in chapter 6. That's very scary.
Yeah, it sure seems to me like the aborted route chapter 6 is maybe going to be kind of huge.
Yeah.
Like, I don't necessarily know if that means huge in the sense of, oh, there's going to be lots of like unique content or whatever, but in the sense of like there's just not really a way to paper over Noelle getting direct evidence that all of the stuff that she's convinced herself was a dream is completely real.
Yeah.
Um,
Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. That's fucking crazy. Is it going to be an effective third route? I try not to put too many expectations on future chapters, but it feels so hard to say that that's not going to be a big change.
Yeah, and I mean, also it's I mean, back on the stuff with Susie, the thing that you're saying about how she still goes on the date with Susie even in the weird route, but Susie doesn't include Noelle in the drawing of her friends for Sans, which is like uh, such a complicated thing to think about because it's obvious that she still likes Noelle, but is maybe has got the vibe from this date that there is some thing between the two of them that just can't be crossed.
Yeah.
That like she can't reach past that to be what she wants to be to Noelle.
Yeah. And that's so interesting. And also just, I mean, I don't know, Sans, okay, so there's two characters that are still there in the festival scene, along when you're walking around with Susie, and it's Sans and Rudy, and I think that's so fascinating. That first off, leaving open the possibility that, that Sans Undertale might be from the Weird Root is scary. And by giving him the card on that side. And then I don't know what to make of Rudy's presence in the Weird Root. I don't know. Isn't it odd that he's on the ground and nobody's noticed or is attending to him, and that he's saying things about how holidays always have surprises? What do you make of that? Because I really don't know what to think.
I don't know. It is fucking mysterious to me. This is one of the things that I truly don't have an answer for because it feels so wide open. But I agree with you that it feels significant, and it's undeniably disquieting. Carol's gonna have a bad day, huh?
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. This chapter really, this chapter and especially the Weird Root really made me feel for Carol, which is a big accomplishment.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like she's very clearly set up to be like, it's the oppressive, like a malicious, controlling mother, and it is like it's I wouldn't say that she wasn't always like that or anything like that, but it is like you get the feeling that probably the loss of a daughter made that way worse, and now she's in the same day losing two more family members. Really wondering if we're going to see anything about what's going on with Carol in whatever the fuck Chapter 7 Side B is.
Yeah, and you're spot on with that. Rudy even says that it used to be better. That Carolness used to be more manageable and more balanced, and that the things have really only gotten worse since then. And it's just, I don't know. Anyway, I do want to, we're somehow already almost 15 minutes in. So I want to move forward and think about, what Noelle sees in Chris at the lake, right? That Chris is changing, that Chris is interesting, that Chris is dynamic, to go back to what's happening, like that. Part of it was so cathartic to see a character finally say, I hate this stupid town, basically, that there's something wrong with this place, and that Chris is interesting, that Chris is something, that somebody's actually noticing that Chris is changing. There's something really powerful in that.
There's something that is so interesting about it to me, in relation to the way that people read or struggle to read this aspect of these two characters. Like, she's commenting on the fact people don't want to see how interesting Chris is, and sometimes that feels to me like what is going on with the way people read this. Like, they don't want to see it.
Yeah.
Because it's tragic and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it is interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I don't know. I'm formulating this thought as I speak. This is not something prepared from notes or anything like this. We know the way that Noelle plays video games, right? She likes to break things. She likes to look for secrets. She likes to make unintended and sometimes scary things happen in games. Is it that the part of what she is seeing in Chris that is so interesting about them is the way that they are doing that to their life, to the world that they live in. They're doing the things they're not supposed to do. They are pushing the boundaries and making something scary happen.
And Noelle likes to be scared.
They're convincing Noelle that she can push too. And you push that far enough, and where you end up is walking out into the lake.
Like she feels stronger than she ever has in her entire life, and she immediately uses that power. She immediately uses that power to take charge and say, this is what I want to do. I want to leave. I want to leave this town, and I want to do it with you. And
she's already used leaving euphemistically once.
Hey, we're going to have a pretty intense discussion, I would say, about the connection, not just with suicide metaphors, but with abuse and assault. Over the next few minutes, I would recommend skipping to about 58 minutes if you feel uncomfortable with that sort of thing. I've thought about it a lot in the edit here, and I've just thought I don't want to censor it because it's really personal to me. And I want to be able to create space for this kind of reading and discussion of the game. So I hope you understand. Again, you can skip ahead if you feel it, but I've left this portion uncensored. Yeah. And so obviously this works in a context as a suicide metaphor, right? But I mean, to use the terminology from the Weird Root too, there's something else. and I don't really know how to talk about it other than, sort of as we sort of talked about it last time, euphemistically.
Talking around it.
I mean, I know, this is a, we use adult language on this show, but like, I don't know. I've been debating how to talk about this the whole time, but it's like there is something specific about playing this versus watching it, where the somatic feeling of the rapidly intensifying inputs as the game goes on, and as Noelle's reactions get more intense and outright euphoric as she drowns, that are, and I'm not the first to say this, I'm not the first to note it, but that are really, really profoundly uncomfortable. Really, I mean, again, I said I failed the first time because it felt too weird for me to do, right? And because it is really just, much like the chapter 4 scene where, they're inching close to each other on the couch and there's implications to that. This feels even more charged in that way. And, again, going back to the top of how personal do I want to be, it's just not something that was lost on me or lost on my own experiences. And again, I don't know. I don't want people to think like I'm being a freak for saying this. I think it's there. And I think that, it's very serious.
Yeah. I mean, it's I don't know. It's metaphorized and mechanized sexual violation. I mean, it's part of what is so like viscerally uncomfortable about it is because it's so readable. It's so in your face in a way that I don't know, ever since I went through that, I keep just like every now and then thinking about Deltarune like shouting ESRB T for teen.
Yeah.
Like it really is. I don't know how they're managing it, but it is.
I think there are so many things about this game, not just the Weird Root, but especially in the Weird Root, where I am so impressed by the ability of this game to basically smuggle complicated ideas and really, really mature ideas into a game with a T content rating, right? And, into a game where you can really, where people who need to see it can see it, right? Where, I just think about, my teenage self who, was sort of in too deep, in over my head, being maybe, to get really personal, maybe pushed to do things I didn't want to do, in the name of my commitment to somebody else, right? And the idea that you could only get out of this town through your connection with somebody else, and I just think it's so incredible, and I think this would have been a really treasured artifact for me when I was younger, right? To be able to have this to connect with. And so, when I say that I think that there's really uncomfortable and, very, very deep implications to what's happening in this route, really deep metaphors of abuse. I'm not saying that out of an interest in, like, I don't know, out of a prurient interest, right? I'm saying it.
I'm so glad you said that. That's exactly the wording I was going to use.
Yeah. And so I hope people don't treat it like that. Don't treat me talking about this like that, because I think it's something incredibly serious to the message of this game. And I think it's really one of the most important things that's going on here, and something that I think is going to be really valuable to a lot of people who, personally, I felt really seen and understood by this in a way that a lot of stuff about growing up never really connected with me like.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that there's a layer of metaphorization and plausible deniability over it is something that will allow it to reach so many more people, even if it might frustrate some readers that it's not just saying what it's about, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a really important aspect of the game, I think, and not just on this topic, related to a lot of things, which are, obfuscated through various layers of metaphorization. I mean, listening to you talk about that also speaks a little to some of my frustrations about trying to think about how to talk about this, because I'm trying to keep complaining about the audience absolutely minimal if I can. There is a real thing that happened with Undertale, which is that people praised so much the message of empathy they felt that they took away from that, and then obviously did not put it into practice, continued to be shitty to each other online, and to willfully participate in the destruction of people for being weird. And I think that there's a degree to which the content of the Weird Route is challenging people to continue to empathize. It's not... Deltarune as a whole is a game that wants you to, come to the point where you can embrace weirdness in people. And that's everything from, I don't know, just queerness to this weird suicidal guy wants to be a cowboy. It's a huge spectrum of things. And I think that this whole side B part of the game is this enormous complication to that of okay, but what happens when it's a type of weirdness that's not fun?
Yeah.
What happens when it's weirdness that culturally and societally people are judgmental of? A weirdness that might be very painful for you, and that people are, eminently willing to make hurt worse because they see it in you.
Yeah.
And it makes talking about it so difficult, because there's so many things that I feel about this story that are really personal, or that ring out really true to me, that I'm just I just can't talk about that on the radio. I don't trust like that. Which is a shame, because I generally am a person who I have a great deal of trust in the general goodness of people around me, but it doesn't necessarily extend to online.
I mean, that's
Um,
totally fair. As someone who's had, some experiences with stalking and negative attention online before, I'm certainly not asking my guests to bear their soul out for the listeners. And it's not because I don't trust you, listener, but, there's just some things that we keep to ourselves.
yeah, it's a fine line between paranoia and OPSEC, but I would say that at this point we're pretty far on one side of that line. Um, but like, I don't know, like it's obviously hard to make a statement about what the thesis of what's being put forth in this story is when it is still unfinished. But the more that the game goes on, the more it becomes, um, the more it feels to me like the game itself, and especially the weird route as one of the most nuanced and complicated expressions of this idea, is about the idea that you can't live without your heart. That
Yep.
you're even if there are aspects of who you are, there are things in your soul that scare you or disgust you or make you think that you might be a bad person. You can't just reject those things. You can't be better simply by hating the things that you think aren't good. It doesn't work that way. Um, Embracing those things that are scary and seem bad and ugly is it's the first step, right? You accept them and you learn to live with them, and living with them rather than living while hating them is how you can come to change and can come to be more of the person you want to be. um, Rejecting the idea that you have bad impulses or thinking of those things as the product of something invading your mind or your soul and making you do or feel bad things is, I think it's also a form of self-harm. It is a way of depersoning yourself, of rejecting the idea that you have agency.
Yeah.
um, uh, which is a really just amazingly difficult and complex thing to try to tackle, and even harder to talk about.
And I just fundamentally don't think that the message of this is you're a bad person for playing the weird route. I don't,
No, I
I
don't
don't,
think it is at all.
I don't think it's didactic and moralizing in that way. And I feel almost as though it's almost deliberately targeted at the, I would say, rather reductive moralistic approach that people took to the No Mercy route in Undertale, right? Which also wasn't quite about that. And it's another one of those ways where I feel as though Deltarune is really consciously focused on the things that were most misunderstood or most unclear about Undertale, right? That that this game is, a response. It's supposed to be played after Undertale, right? It's a response to Undertale in many ways, and I think it's much stranger and more complicated than you are a bad person for playing this game.
Yeah, I there and so this is going to connect to one of those numerous extremely validated called shots that I made on this, which was, I don't know, like a week or so, or I don't know, maybe even just like a couple of days before it came out. I just said to you, I really think that no matter how much this seems like the point of no return, there's still going to be a path out of this.
And there is until the very last minute.
Yeah, you literally up until the very last prompt in that wretched fucking scene, you can stop.
Yeah.
And I think that in Undertale, that was one of the biggest points of the No Mercy route. It's like the point is not about how bad you are if you go all the way through with it. The point is, like, you can go extremely far down that path and still decide that that's not who you are.
Yeah.
And I think that it does, as much as I think that Undertale's approach to it is more simplistic and less compelling to me, I do think that it adds a whole lot to the other way that you can play that game, because the forgiveness and like mercy that you can show to other characters in Undertale carries so much more weight if they are also able to give that to you.
Yeah.
And I think that a big complicating factor in the Weird Route is sort of this question of like, well, can you show that to yourself? Like, I don't know. Can you have grace for yourself for having bad impulses, for feeling the desire to do something that would hurt someone? It's really, I don't know, stunningly mature, and I think about it just like all the time. I really don't think that I would feel so as strongly about this game as I do without this.
Yeah.
Which I guess also like the fact that it is so like blatantly like Christian coded also makes it a little easier to read for me. The way that our Episcopalian puppy Tony Totino is so obsessed with love and the soul and mercy and forgiveness. It's like, oh, this brings it into some clarity for me, I think.
Yeah. That was a brand new phrase on the show.
Sentences that have never been spoken before.
Yes. There's a whole thing that I want to talk about with parallels between Noelle and Ralsei, but I haven't fully thought it out yet. And also we're over an hour now, and I think we're just going to have to put a pin in that for the future. Because I think we've covered this. We'll return to the Weird Route, presumably with some implications and more information in Chapter 6, and then with whatever happens in Chapter 7, Side B. And I'm sure that you'll be here to talk with me about it in that, whether in 11 hours or 11 years, Deltarune is waiting. And
I mean, there's a whole other angle of this that is like related to religion that I was like, I would love to construct a thesis about this to talk about. And then I was just like, that would have to be like its whole other thing. Like there's just not room for that here, I think, because
one of these days we'll get to
one of these days
we'll do the church episode.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's our show, and I'll see you in the outro. Jackie, thanks so much for being on again. Do you want to got anything you want to plug or any closing messages?
No. I guess if you want me to read this excerpt from the Enchiridion of Faith, Hope, and Love, that can be my closing message.
I think that'd be a great closing message.
Yeah, because it's something that's been on my mind a lot as I think about this storyline. The excerpt says, "So long as a being is in process of corruption, there is in it some good of which it is being deprived. And if a part of the being should remain, which cannot be corrupted, this will certainly be an incorruptible being. And accordingly, the process of corruption will result in the manifestation of this great good. But if it do not cease to be corrupted, neither can it cease to possess good of which corruption may deprive it. But if it should be thoroughly and completely consumed by corruption, there will be no good left, because there will be no being. Wherefore corruption can consume the good only by consuming the being. Every being, therefore, is a good. A great good, if it can't be corrupted, a little good, if it can, but in any case, only the foolish or ignorant will deny that it is a good. And if it be wholly consumed by corruption, then the corruption itself must cease to exist, as there is no being left in which it can dwell." It has felt relevant to me, to the fact that you can, even when it seems like things are so far gone, you can stop, and the only point of no return for this storyline appears to be when Chris and Noelle have killed themselves, when there is nothing left of them. I don't know.
Yeah, you can always go home again. Okay, I guess I did want to say one thing. I just wanted to say that, obviously it's a potent suicide metaphor, but I do think that it's pretty clear that something else is happening. Just to head off any comments that think that I have somehow missed that, or like that we've somehow
No. Absolutely, I've not missed the fact that clearly something else is going on when they like. It's not like I didn't see the screen at the end of the Weird Rat that it talks about Chapter 7, Side B.
Yeah.
I expect that it's going to be more complicated than that Chris and Noelle are just dead. But that is the scene that we've been presented with. It's the image that we have been given to think about.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's our show. I'll see you in the outro, and Jackie, I'll see you again in a few episodes down the line as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, excited.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Thanks so much for listening to this one. This was a very intense episode to record, and I really appreciate you listening. And all the discussions that have come from this. I really think this is such an important and valuable part of the game and has led to so many incredible discussions as a community. You can support the show for $5 at groupofshrike.net and get access to our bonus episodes. We're going to have another one next week. As well, you can subscribe on YouTube. We're over 900 subscribers now. It's incredible. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can join the Discord. The Discord's super active. Really enjoy hearing from folks there at the link in the description. This music is now officially released. It's the new Lost Girl remix by Highwell. Check it out at the link in the description. Thanks so much for being a listener, and I'll see you next week.
Shrike Amalgamated General Productions GmbH